report by North Court shows that Nigeria's real estate demand will witness a wait-and-see approach before the 2023 general elections and a pent-up demand post-election. The report also highlights the significance of the Lekki deep-sea port on demand in the Lekki area of Lagos State. Ayo Ibaru, the CEO and Director of Real Estate Research at North Court, joins me for this discussion. Ayo, thank you for taking the time out to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Always great to be here.
Before we move on to unpack the report, I'd like to start by asking you, what in your opinion would you say were the two major defining events in Nigeria's real estate in 2022 that you would say shaped the sector?
Well, that's a very good question because quite a lot happened in 2022. So I will attempt to create a tide that I hope will lift all boats. First of all, we saw a broad recovery from the COVID pandemic. That's one thing that I think helped push all the various sub-markets. And then we also saw retail developers get a bit more ambitious in what they've decided to develop and to construct for the market. And if you permit that I add one more, Actis closed a fund, a $45 million fund, which we use to invest in sustainable assets in the Nigerian real estate market.
All right. Now let's move to the report. Now, quite a robust report, but I'd like you to just briefly walk us through our key highlights and particularly those trends that we should keep an eye on for this year. I know you've said that not much is going to happen before the general elections, but we can expect to see some more action post-elections.
So, interestingly, the Council on Foreign Relations, a New York-based think tank, grouped Nigeria as one of the 5 markets where elections will be holding, and these elections will be critical. So, in our view, 2023 is a year of two halves, pretty much how the economy and the real estate market will perform before the elections and then after the elections. Now, roughly speaking, investors and other stakeholders in the investor market will approach a wait-and-see approach, which is let's see how things go. Let's not take too many heavy bets, and then let's watch how things evolve, especially as we get towards the elections. Now, after the elections, we expect various stakeholders to respond depending on who wins and what their agendas are. I can commit that in writing this report, we did a study on countries around the world who had runoff elections. And the general trend is this. If there is a runoff election and the winner of that runoff pretty much indicates stability and economic reform, then the real estate market will grow. And that's what we saw in 2017 in South Korea, in the case of Moon Jae-in when he won. But if there's a runoff and whoever wins does not send the right signals and there's instability, then we'll have what happened in 2012 when Mohamed Morsi won, and that led to insecurity and the real estate market declined as a result. So that's pretty much what we have as headline indicators as we go into the year.
A number of things I wanted to touch on, starting with still on that point you made, the pent-up demand that we're going to see post-election. In what sectors should we expect to see the most traction?
So, a question in short order, we will give it to land. Land is where we see most of the growth coming in because it's resilient, it's shown itself as a robust asset class, regardless of whether you're in a recession, whether the country is going through instability. Land seems to always hold its own. Close to that, of course, will be industrial. It's interesting that in your news piece just before this section, you made reference to the Lekki deep sea port and all that activity. That is just an indication as to what we expect in the industrial real estate market. Now, we did a study Lagos-wide last year, and it's occurred to us that at the end of the day, warehouses in Lagos are pretty much 80% occupied, and that is irrespective of their grade. So industrial, warehousing, and logistics. For retail also, we expect to see growth, and I would be remiss here if I left out residential, especially residential assets in gated communities. Now, sale transactions are closed pretty much by those in the diaspora, right? And they are the ones who buy. But in terms of leasing, we will see a lot of locals and in-country investors putting their money behind residential. So there are a few other markets that I can speak to, but let's just leave it at that point.
I'd like you to speak to the, very critical role of infrastructure planning, and this is on the back of the issue of climate change that we're seeing here in Africa and also in Nigeria. A good example is the flooding that we saw last year in over 30 states. I'd like you to speak also, this year, as far as climate resilient infrastructure, especially in the real estate and housing sector is concerned. What should we be doing? I know that this is an ongoing conversation, and the real estate sector in Nigeria definitely are also having those conversations and, working towards, sustainability in the way houses are built. But what should we be doing right now?
So I think the conversation around sustainable housing and development has started, and I can sit here and say confidently that the government is working with private sector participants to ensure that development, projects and building toe the sustainable line. And that again brings us back to the $45 million raise that happened last year. And so I would say that we are making progress as a country, but like every observer and commentator on the market, you would want more progress happening faster. Then as regards infrastructure, there was a study that we looked at last year, which suggested that the mere announcement on infrastructure projects pretty much moves up property values around the infrastructure site by about 19.5 to 22%. Good example of this is the areas that will be the takeoff points and the landing points for the fourth mainland bridge in Ikorodu. Again, another infrastructure project that is going to increase the performance of the Lagos State. It will be the Blue Rail project. Now, I've heard people say it took the government too long, it took them 13 years. Yes, it's a valid point, but at the end of the day, when that project goes live, President has a commission, and people are using it, 200,000 people a day, 250,000 people a day. What you will notice is property values will begin to rise along the places where the infrastructure projects and where the rail projects will go through. So that, in a nutshell, is how infrastructure affects property values.
And Ayo, finally, with the contribution of real estate to GDP last year, we saw in Q1 over 5%. Housing supply is still inadequate. What would you like to see happen differently, perhaps maybe from a financing point of view, to get more developers to build more affordable homes, etc.? What are you looking out for?
So interestingly, the federal government and the state governments, through their various plans, have documents that show some kind of direction. I would just want a bit more rigor in those documents, and I would want a bit more, how would I put it now, implementation, because Nigeria is notorious for having well-written documents, perfectly articulated, but when it comes to execution, I guess we need a bit more speed on that. So that's where I would focus.
Thank you so much, Ayo, for talking to us today. We appreciate your time on the show. That was Ayo Ibaru. He's the Chief Operating Officer and Director of Real Estate Research at North Coast.